Labor relations laws in the United States have evolved significantly over the past century, creating a legal framework that governs the relationship between workers, employers, and unions. We introduced the following pivotal laws in this evolution: the Wagner Act of 1935, the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, and the Landrum-Griffin Act of 1959. The early 20th century was a period of intense labor conflict in the United States. The Industrial Revolution had brought rapid economic growth, but also harsh working conditions, low wages, and little job security for workers. The Railway Labor Act of 1926 aimed to protect workers from the most damaging strikes, and National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933 introduced provisions for union organization and collective bargaining, despite lacking strong enforcement mechanisms. This effort served as a precursor to the broader reforms of the New Deal. The Wagner Act of 1935. The 1929 stock market crash and the subsequent Great Depression led to widespread unemployment and economic instability, creating tensions between labor and management. In response, the federal government, under President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, sought to enact reforms to stabilize the economy, protect workers' rights, and promote fair labor practices. This historical backdrop set the stage for the Wagner Act of 1935. The full text of the Wagner Act can be found in the link below, and here's a summary of the core provisions. Core provisions of Wagner Act: right to organize and bargain collectively. The Wagner Act guaranteed employees the right to self-organize, form, join, or assist labor organizations, and to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. Protection of concerted activities. The Act protected employees' rights to engage in concerted activities for mutual aid or protection. This includes activities such as strikes, picketing, and other forms of protests, provided they are conducted legally and peacefully. Unfair labor practices. The Wagner Act defined several unfair labor practices, such as interfering with the formation or administration of any labor organization, discriminating against employees for union involvement, and refusing to bargain collectively with a duly recognized union. Exclusive representation. The Wagner Act grants union exclusive representation if they have majority support, preventing rival or company-controlled unions and ensuring for worker representation. National Labor Relations Board. The Act established the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, an independent federal agency with the authority to enforce labor laws, investigate unfair labor practices, conduct elections for labor union representation, and oversee collective bargaining processes. Landmark case: NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. One of the most significant cases under the Wagner Act was NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation in 1937. In this case, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the Wagner Act, making a turning point in American labor law. Jones and Laughlin Steel fired workers for trying to unionize, which the NLRB ruled as an unfair labor practice. The company argued the federal government overstepped its authority. However, the Supreme Court ruled that the act was constitutional, stating that labor relations had a direct impact on interstate commerce and therefore were within the purview of federal regulation. This decision strengthened the Wagner Act and workers' rights to unionize and bargain collectively. The Taft-Hartley Act of 1947. The Taft-Hartley Act, officially known as the Labor Management Relations Act of 1947, was passed by a Republican-led Congress over President Truman's veto to amend the Wagner Act and curb what many saw as excessive union power. In the wake of World War II, with increased production and union membership, labor unions had become influential political and economic forces. The post-war period, marked by the strikes and labor unrest, led business leaders and politicians to argue that union practices were threatening economic stability and national security. The Taft-Hartley Act aimed to restore the balance between labor and management in the changing environment. Core provisions of the Hartley Act. Restrictions on certain union practices. The Act outlawed specific union unfair labor practices such as secondary boycotts, where unions attempt to pressure a business to stop working with another company involved in a labor dispute. Jurisdictional strikes, strikes by one union to assert its right to represent workers in a particular job over another union. Closed shops, agreements requiring employers to hire only union members were banned, though union shops where employees must join a union after being hired were allowed under certain conditions. Right to work. This provision allows states to prevent unions from requiring all workers to pay dues or fees as a condition of employment. Enhancing rights of individuals and employers. The Act introduced a decertification process, allowing workers to oust their bargaining agent if they no longer want union representation. It also included an employer free speech provision, which permits employers to share their opinions on unionization as long as these statements do not include threats or promises. Government intervention in strikes. The Act provided the president with the authority to intervene in strikes that threaten national health or safety. The president could seek an 80-day cooling-off period during which workers were required to return to work while negotiations continued. New dispute resolution procedures. The Taft-Hartley Act introduced new dispute resolution measures. It restructured the National Labor Relations Board, separating its investigation and judicial functions, which weakened its overall power and limited it to legal matters only. Landmark case, Teamsters Local 695 versus Vote Inc. In this case, the Vote Company sought to stop the Teamsters Union from picketing, claiming it was trying to force employees to join the union, violating Wisconsin's right to work laws. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Vote, upholding the state's right to limit picketing that involved violence or coercion, emphasizing the Taft-Hartley Act focuses on maintaining public orders and regulating union activities to prevent disruptions to commerce. The Landrum-Griffin Act of 1959. The Landrum-Griffin Act, or the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act of 1959, was enacted to address growing concerns about corruption, discrimination, and undemocratic practices within the labor unions. This act sought to protect the rights of union members by promoting transparency and accountability in union operations. The Landrum-Griffin Act was born out of a period of widespread public concerns about corruption and misconduct within labor unions. High-profile investigations such as the McClellan Committee hearing in the late 1950s exposed corruption and undemocratic practices within several major unions, including the Teamsters. The Landrum-Griffin Act was a direct response to these issues, aiming to restore public confidence in the labor movement while safeguarding the rights of union members. Core provisions of the Landrum-Griffin Act: Bill of Rights for union members. The Act established a Bill of Rights for union members, ensuring their rights to free speech, assembly, and equal participation in union activities. Financial transparency requirements. Unions were required to the annual financial reports with the Department of Labor, detailing their income, expenditures, and assets. Disclosure of conflict of interest. The Act mandated the union officers disclose any potential conflict of interest, such as financial interest in companies with which the union does business, to prevent corruption and unethical behavior. Protection against discrimination. The Act prohibited unions from discriminating against members based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, enforcing the principles of equal treatment and non-discrimination. Landmark case, Steelworkers versus Usury, 1976. The Supreme Court case, Steelworkers versus Usury, reinforced the Landrum-Griffin Act provisions on union democracy and transparency. The case centered around the Department of Labor's authority to regulate union elections to ensure they were conducted fairly and democratically. The court ruled in favor of the Department of Labor, upholding its authority to oversee union elections and protect members' rights to fair representation. This decision emphasized the Act's role in promoting democratic governing within unions and safeguarding members' rights against abuses by union leaders. In summary, the Wagner Act, Taft-Hartley Act, and Landrum-Griffin Act represents three critical stages in the evolution of labor relations law in the United States. Each law responded to unique historical challenges and sought to balance the rights and responsibilities of workers, employers, and unions. The Wagner Act provided protections on union activities, while Taft-Hartley Act restricted some union activities and protected certain employer rights to provide a balance. And the Landrum-Griffin Act addressed the corruption and discrimination issues. The landmark cases associated with these acts further shaped their interpretation and implementation, ensuring that labor relation laws continue to adapt to the changing landscape of the American workplace. Together, these laws form the foundation of labor relations in the United States, promoting fair treatment, transparency, and accountability in the relationship between labor and management. Thanks for watching.